Awesome. Okay. Thanks, John. We're underway. We'll go ahead and get started. I know many of you. My name is Chris Fabian, and I'm CEO of ResourceX. And today is a webinar that's in a continuing series that we've been providing, certainly since COVID really took hold in March, about how to take action using programmatic data. That's our theme. And it's been quite fascinating to see the intersection of how programmatic data is being used, whether it's for helping weather the revenue downfalls of COVID-19 impacts, the Defund the Police or Reimagine police discussion, and certainly contributing to our work in promoting social equity. It's been just phenomenal. Last Friday, we did a presentation on this very topic for the Transforming Local Government Conference. And today's presentation is very similar to that. I know, Tim from FEMA, you're on the line. So we do have a few new twists, as always. Always good to try to improve on the last presentation, but by and large, it will be a very similar theme for anybody who participated last week. We are recording this session, so we will be uploading this recording to YouTube and making sure that we send it out. But I'm going to start by framing the presentation and going back not too long ago, but kind of seems like a long time ago in some respects. This is a picture of New York City during shelter in place, when all of the immediate impacts of COVID were really starting to be felt across the country and certainly across the world. And from our perspective, working with the local governments who we support, this obviously got us on the path of thinking about the significant economic impact and the revenue shortfalls that you've all been experiencing, for how we can start to think about, okay, what is this actually going to mean for local governments, having an uncertain future, to say the least, about the magnitude of the revenue shortfall, but it was becoming quickly apparent we're going to have to start to look at how are we going to address it from a service level perspective. At the same time, not only were revenues going down, but we saw certain services actually need to be enhanced. The cost of increased testing from a public health perspective has led many local governments to actually have certain programs that, no matter the revenue decline, actually need more support, more personnel, more equipment. And so we have service level increases at the exact same time, which sometimes tends to be the case. So the strain is magnified. And also going on was the imperative to continue to fund our basic services, our core services. Providing clean drinking water doesn't slow down in need because we have a revenue shortfall, nor does trash collection or paving the streets. So this is the world that you're living in, and certainly we appreciate so well. And then in the midst of everything taking place on the COVID front, there emerged the repercussions from the George Floyd incident and so much more, that opened up a discussion around reform and reimagining police and increasing equity and the need for change, whether that takes the shape of needing new revenues or new resources, or how the resource component comes into play is yet to be determined, but programmatic change is certainly at the center of this discussion. And the spirit of this presentation is we're trying to contribute to your discussions. We're trying to contribute to your path of decision-making and achieving this change. And while program-based business intelligence, what we'll talk about today, is one key component of your puzzle, we realize there's so much more that needs to take place. So I hope never to come across as that we have a silver bullet for all these issues, but there is something profound about getting to programmatic discussions that can give us all a substantial leg up in strategizing for how we come up with solutions. And so our belief, which I will be trying to bring it back to all throughout today's presentation, is that programs, talking about the programs we offer, this is a vehicle for the type of change that we need to see whether it's equity, police, or responding to COVID-19. And so you might be thinking, what are other vehicles for change that are also very powerful? We certainly think about the policy side of things. Changing policy or introducing new policy or showing up at a council meeting and really starting to think through how we govern overall, that is definitely a very positive, it can be a very positive vehicle for change. Others of you might be thinking about the budget. Certainly in the Defund the Police discussion, that is where it's centering, is some sort of budgetary reparation that will have an impact that we're seeking. And I think if you all are like me, there's a connection there, but it's not totally complete. But these are also vehicles for change, policy and the budget. But they're not always central to the conversation. As we just mentioned, as we think about the things that we might do to change our approach to equity, it's very possible that it might not have anything to do with the need for more budget. It's very possible that we don't need policy changes in the way that we adapt and respond to COVID-19, but programs, from what we're beginning to discover, and a conversation around programmatic change does appear to be at the center of the Venn diagram, where all of these challenges that we're facing can at least be centered. And that's pretty exciting. So we'll hopefully get into applications of this for those of you who have programmatic data, how to use your programmatic data to talk about revenue shortfalls from COVID-19, reimagining police services and repurposing those resources, and other issues of the day. We have some communities who we've just been talking with who are talking about climate change and how programmatic data can be central in that discussion, or homelessness, or other wicked problems that we all enjoy our role in tackling, in addressing, trying to move the needle. That's why we chose public service in the first place. So as we get started, again, this is a few slides taken from our Transforming Local Government conference last week. I thought I'd start with a bit of a warm-up, and please feel free to participate in the chat. But the warm-up is this: thinking about the impacts from COVID, from coronavirus. I want you to think about identifying a trend that is emerging because of COVID that presents both an opportunity to save money. So COVID happened, and now we actually have an opportunity to reduce costs, as well as an opportunity to positively impact health. Can you come up with a trend and share it with the other participants? And I'll just pause and let you think about it for a second. No Jeopardy music or anything, but I'll grab some water. It's a stumper. It is like around lunch. So I can imagine some remote work. Thanks, Roger. That's great. Definitely. This came up last time we did the discussion. Telecommuting, a positive trend with some associated cost savings. Yes, remote work, telecommunication, partnerships have greatly improved. These are awesome. All great trends, and actually far more profound than the example that I'm going to share with you here in just a second. But thank you for participating, Christy and Danielle, as well. A simple one is thinking about physical mail and reducing the need of physical mail delivery, recognizing on the one hand that the actual materials can hold coronavirus. There's been some attempts to figure out, can we transition more to email or electronic distribution, and that would simultaneously reduce the costs where we have mail going out the door from postage, from materials, and also at the same time produce a positive public health impact. And why I'm starting with this warm-up is a gateway into talking about programmatic data. When this first came up, this is from one of our clients, the immediate question is, man, if this is true and this is really cool, where would we start to come to understand where we have programs within departments that are actually delivering mail. The conversation immediately goes there. If we can find out what these programs actually are and talk about, hey, departments, can you identify where you have mail being sent out, and what can we do to minimize that would save us money, and what are those cost savings, and what are the health impacts, that becomes the quest. And if all we had was a line item budget, or if that was the only business intelligence we could bring to this discussion, we could certainly find out where the non-personnel line item for postage exists, and that would give us a clue for the departments driving that cost, but it wouldn't finish the puzzle exactly for where are we going to achieve those cost savings. So I'm going to show you, this is a snapshot from one of our organizations, the City of Aurora. As they dive into their data, they can poke into that non-personnel series of line items across the entire city. And indeed, just like anybody with line item data could do, you could find your non-personnel postage and shipping line item. And then the next question would be, who are the departments who are actually driving that cost? Because not everybody has physical mail going out the door. In their case, it's the water department, right? You have utility billing that takes place, communications, parks and rec, even finance. And then you can see it sort of trails off. Like maybe I would be less interested to study what's happening in city council for their $176 associated with postage and shipping. But if I started at the top, like let's dive into the water department, because of programmatic data, they can get into what are the actual programs using postage and shipping, and it's customer billing, is your utility billing function, and public information, and then those costs actually trail off. I now have new insight. I have two programs that I can go to say, I'm going to study these, and they're not insignificant. Here's $500,000 going to utility billing, and now I can really have a conversation about how we might do that differently, and that becomes a really cool insight for an initiative to take action on. I could look into some of the other departments. Here's Parks and Rec. We saw they had some postage costs driving their line item, and they have marketing and communications and special events. I might not have known that right off the top of my head, that they have physical mail going out the door, and again, not insignificant from a cost perspective, and I can focus there on how we can minimize mail delivery, and even one more from the communications department, their basic mail center. That one makes sense. We might have been able to figure that one out off the top of our head. But the point here is the enrichment of the conversation that can take place once we start to have programs to talk about simply can't be understated. We're working with another client who, in their pursuit of cost savings, ways that they can come back with real budget recommendations to the budget office prior to working with us, the best source of intelligence to look for cost savings is the line item budget detail that we have. And that's what you're seeing right here on the screen. And we believe the line item data isn't bad. If this is all you have, hey, you have to tackle this problem with the tools and the data and the information that's in front of you, but it leaves something to be desired. If I was looking for $1 million in cost savings here and all I have are line item accounts, I have to come up with line item solutions. I can only choose, hey, maybe we can do something about reducing retirement because that's one of my line item choices. Maybe I can do something to reduce our healthcare costs overall. But already I'm starting to feel that tension build up around these are personnel related, and I'm not even really sure if I cut back on some of these personnel related expenses, what happens? Is this even allowable? What impacts will these cost reductions actually have on the services we provide and on the outcomes that matter most to our citizens? But if I could use this exact same data, and instead, if I told you that all of what you're seeing right here are the costs, the composite costs of programs offered by a typical facilities department in this organization, now I have new insight. It's very much a forest from the trees kind of situation where I've elevated out from the weeds of the line item detail, and now I can talk about what are the programs for which those costs are associated. So I have custodial, our basic janitorial services. I have our procurement function. I have our energy and utilities overall. And I can certainly drill into custodial and janitorial and see how much it's costing from a personnel or non-personnel perspective. And if I really wanted to get into why does it cost us $7.3 million to provide our janitorial services with the data that they've put together around programs, which we'll talk about how to do this, we can see the personnel costs broken out from their non-personnel. And even in this particular example, I noticed that the majority of their costs are non-personnel. If you drill down even further, you see there's a $4.5 million line item associated with professional services. There's a large outsourced component of this function. But now we're in programmatic data. And back to a COVID trend, many of you had just mentioned around telecommuting that presents an opportunity. We now have a program to talk about because of teleworking. For example, can we provide custodial services more efficiently? Because, hey, if we have even some portion of our organization who is not returning to our central offices, maybe we can reduce the level of service for this particular program because we have less facilities to actually keep clean. So an insight would be, we have a program efficiency opportunity here, and because I have this programmatic data, I can actually dig into it and find out what can we actually do. Another side of the coin, however, might be, yeah, but for the remaining component of City Hall that is still open, we're going to need actually an increased level of service, perhaps. For those who are coming back to work, we really want to make sure that their environment is clean, and we're doing everything possible to reduce the potential for a spread of infection. So we might actually see a service level increase for the facilities that remain. And then because this particular organization, some of you on the call might be thinking, wow, 7.3 million for a custodial, that's pretty large. This is a giant organization, the sample set that I'm demonstrating here. But for larger organizations, they might see an opportunity for how they can provide this program regionally and leverage some of their local partners. Danielle, you talked about this. Everybody needs janitorial and custodial services for the most part. So if you're an organization that's as equipped and has the capacity to provide this type of program, think about smaller organizations or nonprofits in your community, other local governments, even the private sector, who probably can't afford to provide some of these basic custodial services today. Is there a regional partnership opportunity, an economy of scale, where maybe you can provide it to another entity and they can pay you, and we start to move into entrepreneurial ways to generate revenue overall? Well, that's a simple example, but the point being, this is what begins to happen when we can start to look at data from a programmatic perspective. We can start to see opportunities that weren't entirely evident from our line item data alone. And so our thesis goes something like this, and this will be the last section of my intro before we dive into, let's really start applying this to COVID situations and talk about how it works with Reimagining Police and equity as well. Our belief is you already have great data. You start with your line item data, and that is, as we said in the beginning, the budget can be a powerful vehicle for change. But if we can add new data, create a program inventory, associate those line items with the programs you provide, and actually come to learn other things about those programs, we can create data that didn't exist before, and that is going to set us on our voyage for programmatic change. The way we think about it is leveraging that line item data. We can slip in a program inventory through cost allocation. We can connect it, so we not only have a program inventory, but we have the cost of providing those programs. And these other layers that you're seeing being introduced, such as basic program attributes or impact on outcomes or the program's future direction, these are all things that we can learn about the program. We can learn about its cost. We can learn, perhaps, is it mandated? How mandated is it? What is the population served by the particular program? Is demand going up, like contact tracing, or is demand going down, like custodial and janitorial? We can begin to tag programs. We can learn something about them. We can learn about their impact on community outcomes and results. If you want to study your programs and their impact on equity, it would be great to try to measure that. And that's what we see in that yellow layer. And we'll get into this in the presentation. And then finally, in purple, we can start to consider, where is this program going? Does it need more resources? Is it fine the way that it is? Does it need less resources? Is there a partnership opportunity? This is what we mean when we start to talk about creating great data. Now, the little graphic on the left-hand side, the more data layers we're able to connect, the better the insights for what we could actually do next with this information. And so data leads to insight creation. When we were talking about the custodial program and I was tagging it with a program efficiency opportunity, a service level increase opportunity, or a regional partnership opportunity, that's what we call insights in our work. For those of you on the call who are practitioners, you begin to keep track of these in the tools. For those of you who are brand new to all of this work, every program has perhaps the potential to move from a status quo degree of providing the service to a more efficient way to do it, or a service level increase opportunity or regional insourcing, and there are many more. So we'll talk about what it means to get to the insight level. And then finally, with a treasure trove of insights, which is what we're trying to get you to, then we can take action. And that action might be the list of recommendations that you need to move into the budget adoption process and actually react to creating a sustainable budget this year. Many of our organizations, that's how they're using their data to create insights, to create that list of actionable recommendations. For other organizations who are focused on equity, for example, it might not have anything to do with the budget, but it might be the programs that you can take action on if you're really trying to move the needle and try to improve equity overall in your community. So this is the mindset that will continue to follow as we now move into really applying it for the situations that we're facing. Let's start with coronavirus. And what we have seen, what all of us have lived through, certainly over March and into April and up to today, is that most of our organizations have had to react fast. The types of solutions that we've had to deploy haven't necessarily been programmatic, and that's okay. We had to act as fast as possible to make sure that we're going to stay in business, stay afloat, and provide core services. So we see furloughs being rolled out. We see deferring capital projects because that's a great cash flow solution. And we see hiring freezes and so on and so forth. We presented with GFOA back in March and in April. And for these types of solutions, GFOA recommended it in their article, Cash is King, because they are the most immediate, tangible solutions we can deploy to take care of your cash flow. The problem is there likely comes a time when these types of solutions, we've exhausted them. We've used all of our one-time, immediately accessible furlough type solutions, deferring capital project solutions. And if there is any sort of continued rise in infection rates, a resurgence seasonally, there's still a lot of uncertainty out there. Our worry is the time is now to start to think about the service level changes that we can make and we can possibly deploy, because we won't have many more of these types of solutions to stay afloat. And so that's where we want to begin to transition. Our communities, when it comes to insights, are trying to capture where what's the list of every single program you provide that actually needs to be talked about from a service level increase perspective. What are the programs that we're providing that, no matter how much we would love to save money or achieve an efficiency, it's still in status quo. You think about providing clean drinking water, as I mentioned earlier in the slides, there's probably not a whole lot that we're going to do to change that program. If we can find a solution there, that's wonderful. But there are going to be a host of programs you provide where the designation is status quo. There are a host of programs that we provide where, even if temporarily, think Parks and Rec, there would probably be an opportunity to decrease the level of service. We see records management, FOIA requests, signage, where it's not a forever change, but we can capture it. And if you had the list of every program you provide and the resources, then we could say, these are the ones that we think we can really reduce, even if we're going to have to restore our level of service by 2021 or 2022, let's capture what that cost savings might be. There's option to suspend temporarily You think of a aquatic center and some of the parks and rec facilities or passport processing, again, things that we can reinstate later. And then we move into partnerships. There's external partnerships, like we were talking about a moment ago with custodial and janitorial. We see external partnerships starting to take place from the very complex side, like regionalizing fire. One of our clients is for the very first time having this discussion. It's a discussion that has made sense for quite some time, but never has there been the political will to really go in that direction. And then simpler ones like regional fleet, where maybe the larger city among other smaller neighboring local governments has the capacity to think about being an in-sourcing partner, again, where these optimization solutions from a regional perspective have probably made sense for a while, but now for the first time there really is enough political will to move forward and try to make something happen. And it can always change in the future, but it's a way to optimize resources to the greatest extent possible sooner than later. And then we have internal partnership consolidation. We were talking with one of our clients about regional fleet, and as they dug into their programmatic data, they saw that they had internal fleet consolidation opportunities, and that's fantastic. It's much easier to do internal consolidation and some centralization solutions than it sometimes is to consider other partners outside of your jurisdiction. But our point with COVID is this is one of the biggest strategies we can point you to. If you have programmatic data, being able to tag them with the appropriate insight for where is that program actually headed. One of our client organizations who went through this exercise took it one step further and not only talked about, okay, so where is the opportunity to find the program efficiency, for example, and what are the cost savings associated with it, but they then scored or tagged the program with degree of actionability. Is this something that we can deploy within the next 6 months? Is it pretty simple? So that's highly actionable. Is it something we could deploy within the next 6 to 12 months, 12 to 18, and so on, beyond 2 years? And with that, they could really focus on programmatic opportunities that made the most sense for their current budget situation and differentiate some of those solutions that seem a little bit more long-term. You see this red dashed arrow, they said, you know, to the best of our knowledge, these ideas that have been developed seem like they're maybe over a year in the making and might take us a long time, but what if we study these in particular because they're so large, and is there anything we can do to make them slightly more actionable? And that was really cool. So part of their internal task force and committees are studying those programs to see, can they move them into the more actionable category? And then degree of complexity. They scored programs in terms of, are they going to be pretty easy to deploy, suspending or centralizing mail delivery across the organization, or trying to cut down on the amount of physical mail that we put out there. It has some complexity because you'll have to figure out an e-solution, but on the scale of reducing physical mail delivery versus regionalizing fire services, fire tends to be on the harder side and physical mail may be on the easier. And that was really worthwhile and insightful in their exercise because they could then really hone down on, these are the solutions they really need to be focusing on. What is the execution plan? Who needs to decide? And how quickly can we actually deploy and realize these cost savings? So all of this I'm talking about in the response to coronavirus, it comes to a philosophy that we preach at ResourceX, and it's that every program has a future to it. And to the extent that you can have your program inventory to work from first, and then be able to tag, get that feedback back from departments, come to agreement on what is the future. Is it an efficiency solution? Is it a service level increase solution? This is an exercise that we would highly encourage for each of you, whether you work with us or you don't. In order to execute the Every Program Has a Future initiative, we use a blueprint. And it goes something like this. The left-hand side of the blueprint are programs that actually need more resources. They need to grow. Pre-COVID, you see this is maybe comical, but hopefully not. Pre-COVID, we were focused on a 3 to 5 years down the road type of time horizon, where we're really thinking big picture, like, hey, put yourself several years down the road and ask for every program you provide, does it need to grow? If it's 3 to 5 years from now and you're looking back, if the program has not grown and you're feeling like, man, this is bad news, you know you have to designate it with service level increase. It has to expand. A poster child for this is something like cybersecurity in your IT department, where it's kind of a known issue that the threats that we're all facing from a security perspective continue to grow. And so if we're all still providing the exact same level of service in the same way for cybersecurity 3 to 5 years down the road as we are today, it's probably not good. And so we want to tag that program and get it on the table, whether we can get resources there today or not. That's where we're headed. So that's the left-hand side of the blueprint. And for all of the programs that are tagged with service level increase, contact tracing is another one for this era. They might need more resources, and we want to be able to document that. But it's a balanced equation. For this wish list, so to speak, on the left-hand side, we need the resources reallocated from the right-hand side of the blueprint. So we're also looking for where are the programs where we can free up and reallocate resources away from. There's our physical mail delivery, it's our custodial and janitorial, and more. And we're trying to document, are there some programs where it just makes sense? We can reduce the level of service we're providing, we can achieve a program efficiency, or we can source it a different way if it meant that we can free up and reallocate those resources to the left-hand side. And then the bottom right-hand side is yet another way to accumulate the resources that you need to fund the left, and that is looking at fees and charges for every program we provide. It's looking at insourcing. Where can you be a regional provider and actually charge and act entrepreneurially and make money? And on the grant funding side of things, where can we use and deploy CARES Act money? We just came across an article, and I know DOLA's on the line, Department of Local Affairs here in Colorado, and FEMA is participating here as well, that of all the CARES money for local government, there's an astounding amount that is still left on the table. And to the greatest degree of our knowledge right now, the way the policy is written, those resources will go back to the federal government if we don't deploy them. So we definitely need a strategy around how can we use CARES money as new revenue to fund the things that actually need to be resourced. We need to focus on that. And that is a direction for a handful of programs we provide, maximize the opportunity that they can actually qualify for that grant funding. And then lastly, the whole point of the blueprint is that when it comes to basic taxes and rates, for most of us, this is a drain right now. This is going in the opposite direction. It's leaking resources because we had to close down. And so with that drain, not only do you need more resources on the left, but you're losing resources on the revenue side on the right. So all of our free up and reallocate and all of our revenue generating opportunities have to make up for it. You'll see these in your slides, but this is the way the exercise goes. Looking at the entire program inventory for any of your departments, have them document what are the programs that actually need to grow right now if we're having a COVID discussion. Right-hand side of the blueprint, for any program, do we have a revenue generating opportunity? Thinking boldly into the future, do we have a chance to revisit fees in a way that might have not been appropriate in the past, but it's a new day? Do we have an opportunity to look at insourcing, regionalizing, and generating new revenue? And do we have some grant funding opportunities? So let's tag those programs with that opportunity and see how far we get and what is the magnitude of new revenue increase. And then top right, where can we act opportunistically and look for programs where it just makes sense. We can get by even temporarily with suspending service levels or reducing them. What programs offer a program efficiency opportunity, and where can we outsource, take advantage of the fact that somebody else can provide fleet services, and let's send our vehicles over there for a period of time. And we have to explore each and every opportunity that we have. But this is the spirit of every program has a future. And the bottom line is, when you add up all of the opportunities, this is an example from South Jordan, Utah, pre-COVID, it is a balanced equation. So South Jordan, for 3 years, had a pretty flat budget, at best about a 1% growth overall. You know, for some of us right now, we'd love to have 1% growth. But over this period of time, they did not have new resources coming into the city coffers, and therefore not a whole lot of new money to fund the left-hand side of the blueprint. However, during the time that they've been applying this mentality that every program has a future, they have somehow managed to fund the new programs that they provide to the tune of 18% growth, $10.2 million invested in new programmatic growth. And the only way that they're able to do that, whether it's pre-COVID or today, is they found 3% from surface level reduction. They found another 3%, 1.7 million through program efficiencies, and they outsourced where it made sense, where there's a win-win, to the tune of freeing up 5% of their overall budget, another 2.6 million, while at the same time getting creative, acting entrepreneurially, generating 3.5 million from regional insourcing opportunities and fees and charges where that made sense. I show you this because pre-COVID or post-COVID, it doesn't really matter. The point is it can be done. Resource reallocation is a major opportunity for you all, and revenue generation as well. And this is where we think your best solutions exist programmatically for the COVID situation. Let's move from COVID to reimagining police services. And the graphic that we chose, you know, we talked a little bit about it in the beginning of the presentation, but the tagline, and this has been discussed a lot out there, that maybe defund the police isn't exactly the idea. Maybe it is. Maybe it's exactly what is the strategy according to some policymakers. But overall, what we're starting to see is, okay, the message is loud and clear. How do we change the way that we're approaching these particular programs? And maybe the net outcome is they need less resources. And if that's true, going back to the blueprint, if they need less resources and you do it in the right way, maybe that can be a cost savings and a resource reallocation opportunity overall. But when it comes to tackling this discussion, we are beginning to engage with some of our client organizations using the program inventory data once again to say, from what programs are we actually wanting to focus this discussion? What programs do we want to defund, or what programs do we want to change the way that they're being delivered? And that's where we need to start the focus. And then bottom right, towards what other programs do we want to reallocate those resources? So if we do in fact defund and we free up massive amounts of resources, where do we want to put them in terms of programs that need funding that will enhance our ability to create a safe community overall? One of our client organizations, Salem, Oregon, as they are beginning these conversations with their city council and with their citizens, this is their program inventory. So you see everything from patrol to dispatch to youth services or the canine unit. And I thought what was really powerful from this scenario is that when we're talking about reforming the police or defunding the police or reimagining, it's highly likely, as you scroll all the way down the list, you know, and it's very valuable to say, we're probably not talking about graffiti removal. Maybe we are, but how nice it is to be able to get down to this level of programmatic detail and say, is this on the table for the spirit of this conversation, what we're talking about? Or is it in fact, in their case, that we really want to talk differently about how we do patrol, how a safe community is achieved, what type of resources are actually being deployed to help a citizen in distress. And a lot of the conversation is shifting towards dispatch, where yes, it's a program that oftentimes already costs a lot to provide, but there's so much pressure on that call coming in when someone's life is in danger or there's some other type of trouble, to diagnose the situation correctly and deploy the appropriate resources. If we can talk about the dispatch program and whether mental health professionals need to be deployed, whether patrol officers need to be deployed, that there's a lot of reimagining that can come from reimagining dispatch. We've included in your slides and this is kind of interesting for those who are current practitioners of programmatic-based business intelligence, as well as any of you who are on the call who are not currently practicing. We have mined our data. This is a snapshot of about 80 cities, and we posted this on ICMA Connect. The average amount of resource allocation for any given budget across these 80 cities, and here's patrol and dispatch, similarly to the trend that we just saw in Salem, and just seeing, upwards of 40% of the budget in patrol, 10% of the budget in dispatch, moving all the way down. If you don't have programmatic data yet, this could be an interesting place to start. And we talk about animal control and youth and the gang unit, and this does open that conversation to say, are there programs we can take off the table that we're really not talking about, and where do we need to put our focus in this reimagining police discussion overall? The last section I wanted to get into is the discussion of equity. And it is an entirely different conversation, although there are intersections than simply defunding the police. But we have several organizations when it comes to pursuing the outcome of increased equity, social justice. They are focused on achieving a result and really tackling this conversation, and we are passionately behind them. The application of programmatic data comes into play when these client organizations have become very specific about what it is that they're trying to achieve. And you can ask about every program, how can you change this program in order to achieve the intended outcome? So City and County of Denver has an Office of Equity. We presented about this with ICMA just a few weeks ago and ELGL. Denver defines equity that they're pursuing as a systemic endeavor that results in equitable opportunities and outcomes where the race and ethnicity of individuals can no longer be used to predict life outcomes, and therefore the outcomes for all groups of people are improved. So this is an objective, is a result, and this is where Denver has tackled this from a policy perspective, and we're going to come back and back it up with program data here in just a moment. Different organization we're working with is City of Tacoma, Washington. They too have an equity objective, a racial equity objective, and you see how they've defined it specifically, that engagement of communities of color rooted in anti-racist strategies and principles, anti-racist investment in creating and building economic opportunity and access for communities of color, and anti-racist strategies and investment in building and growing household stability, access, safety, and or health of communities of color. Different than Denver's, lots of intersection, that's for sure, but the takeaway here is be clear about what you're trying to achieve. And the clear that you can become, now let's get into programmatic data and the type of change that you can enter into discussions about to achieve these particular results. So this is Denver, and I won't go through all these examples. ICMA has their webinar, the link for free on their website. But with Denver, they're using their program inventory. Again, that's the common denominator for all of the solutions that we're talking about, and asking for each of those programs, what is it that we could do to change the way we provide this program in order to increase our social equity objective? So if you are thinking back to, wait, how is this different or the same than the blueprint and every program has a future? This could involve resources. These changes could involve the need for more resources or a change in the budget, but it's not centrally focused on the budget. That's just really cool. Programmatic change can take the shape of non-resource related discussions. Let me give you an example. Top left is snow removal. So Denver's trying to increase their way to provide an equitable community, and they're recognizing that there is a higher level of service need in certain neighborhoods to actually be prepared to shovel sidewalks and provide access for people that don't have vehicles so they can walk and access the bus station and therefore public transportation in order to get to their jobs. Makes total sense. Certain pathways need to be shoveled and plowed in order to allow access to their local economy and their grocery stores. So you take a program like snow removal, where from my perspective, it wouldn't have been the first place that I would have thought of as a way to change our approach to increasing equity, but how cool and how profound that even a less obvious program like snow removal lends itself perfectly well to this discussion. Here's a program where we can change the service level and change the way that we're achieving equity. Bottom left, impound lot. Denver also is reevaluating their fees and their revenue structure and their fines, and they're looking for reform. They think they can increase equity by lowering the barrier for what it takes to get your car out of the impound lot after it's been towed, and they're doing away or at least minimizing some of their revenue collections. Back to the blueprint, that was a source that we were looking to increase if we were only focused on the budget solution. But now they totally turned the tables and said, yeah, but we actually want to decrease the fines that are coming in from this program because it will have a positive impact on our approach to equity. So there is a translation for any of these programmatic changes to the blueprint to intersect your objectives and initiatives, your insights for equity, and compare them to their impacts on the budget situation. So full circle, we believe programs are a vehicle for change. The overall approach follows a data layering methodology where you can take your line item data, slip in a program inventory, allocate your costs, and then begin to layer on key pieces of information, basic program attributes. Is the program mandated? Does it recover its costs? What about the population served? Are there other potential providers of this program? Insights and action. Where are we headed with this program? Is it left side of the blueprint, service level increase? Is it right-hand side of the blueprint? This is the programmatic formula to at least bring data into your discussions. I know we have about 10 minutes left, so I did want to leave some opportunity for some Q&A. And please, if you want to type in the chat about some of your thoughts on either developing programmatic data in the first place, if that is where your organization is at, or leveraging your programmatic data to enter into any of these discussions, please, I invite you to ask your questions. I'll get a drink of water. You can feel free to continue to ask your questions as they come, or if you're pondering them, and certainly after this presentation, if you would like to bring up specific questions, I'll type my email, and if other staff would do the same. But I'm Chris Fabian. Thanks, Roger. I appreciate that. Man, it's extremely resource X.net. It's extremely important work right now. We have to take on these initiatives, and it's not easy to figure out exactly where to start. When Salem, Oregon, talked to us about the Defund the Police discussion that was taking place, that's not our area of expertise in terms of all of the systemic change that we might want to begin to contemplate and change the way that the world is. However, our glimmer of hope was nobody has a great, perfect solution to that. It's just the spirit and the intent. And our focus was, well, if we can add data to a positive spirit, that's where we belong. That's our role that we can help play, is programmatic data, where your resources are being allocated, and using that as a springboard or a platform to talk about, well, we agree with the objective, just like we saw in Denver and Tacoma. Now let's talk about each and every program we offer and how are we going to change it to affect that type of change. For those of you who are new to all of this, this is the business that we're in. We provide the data creation facilitation, the support services, and the software, as you've seen in many of the slides, to create a program inventory, do cost allocation within our tools, come up with a cost for every program, and then lead through the insight and action work for any of these types of situations. So if that was not abundantly clear, that's what we do. For those of you who are our current clients, what we were substantially interested in is, if you didn't know yet, that insight and action work that we can do together with you is helping to facilitate how to take advantage of your programmatic data to get into these discussions. That's what we wanted to make sure that you're aware of. The opportunity is here, and we'd love to help. Well, thank you everybody so much for attending. We're going to continue to provide these types of resources. We post on ICMA Connect, if that's where you learned about us, and certainly on LinkedIn and Twitter and our own website. Thank you, Eric, for posting what you just did in the chat. Please stay tuned. We have other webinars coming up on how to apply the data, and I think we can probably bring it to a wrap. But just thank you so much, everybody, and we'll send out the recording. I promise you that. Thanks, Danielle. Thanks, Christy.